Hi, I'm Molly Matthews, and welcome to Job IQ Outside the Box. Today I'm here with a married couple who are both psychiatrists, and I'd like to say welcome to David and Jill Scharff.
Thank you.
Tell us what
Nice
you
to
do.
be here. Shall I go first?
Please do.
Oh, ladies first. We're psychiatrists, we're psychoanalysts. We work with adults and children, couples and families, and we teach quite a bit. We founded an institute in 1994, which is still going strong under new leadership now, which takes us to the point of our being here, I guess.
Which is, what do you do after you hand off your professional baby?
That's
Right.
exactly why we're here. And one of the things that I've done the research and looked at literature that says if you see someone who's doing things a little ahead of you, you can follow their footsteps or learn from them. So the people that are listening today, what would you tell them you learned from the transition of an institute you built in the 90s to where you are now?
Well, my thought about it, first of all, we needed to hand on our institute, our teaching institute, so that it could survive us. And also, I wanted to do it while I was young enough to do something else, which so far is working.
And I want to know what that something else is, but what's your answer to the pass it along question?
I've always thought that before you do any project, you have to have a succession plan built in. So from the beginning, I was always handing over one role to someone else, then the next role to someone else. And so it's going on, because although we've handed over being directors of this institute, I mean, the truth is we're still kind of there. We're just not in charge. But we still run things, like I run a child program, and David runs the international programs, which is his new thing, reaching out to China and Russia.
We've written a lot, so we get invited places. That's the main virtue of writing. There's a certain amount of money.
Writing well, I would say.
And so we've been invited a lot of places, but about 10 years ago we started going to China, an invitation that came to Jill from a student who'd read one of her books. And I very much wanted to go with her because I think I really have wanted to go other places. And on this occasion they asked us, through complicated people we met,
Yeah.
but to run a training program. So that was really terrific because I was interested in doing that, and I needed to get out of the way of the people we had passed our program on to, so they could run it their way. And so my projects have really involved setting up a training program in China, which has evolved into other programs there that will expand that.
But first of all, you could say, well, wait, that's just the same thing you were doing at home. But it isn't, because the people that we're training are at a very different stage of development. They haven't had access to the kind of analytic thinking or European philosophical thought that the analytic thinking comes out of. So you're dealing in a completely different context. There's masses to learn.
Right, and what's wonderful about it is the amount to learn. So it's a different culture, the deep structure, their thought is different, and that's let me feel like a learner, a late life learner. And I do feel anyhow our work lends itself to being a lifelong student, which
You'd also be surprised how many people I've interviewed for Outside the Box talking about being a lifelong learner. And
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
a
yeah?
big motivator.
I think it's
Yeah.
really crucial to do something you're interested in that you can keep your mind engaged with. So that's led to me writing about China and the cultural differences and what we have learned there, and writing a book and establishing a journal and more training programs. And now recently the same sort of thing has opened up in Russia.
But it's also taken you into partnership with demographers and lawyers that bring, and economists that bring another perspective.
So it really has been
To
a
the
career
in-depth
pivot
work.
from what you've been doing.
And young people.
A lot
Yeah.
of young people.
Especially in China.
Yeah.
What's it like working with young people?
Oh, it just is so invigorating and inspiring that there are all these amazing young people who do things you would never have thought of doing.
Well, Jane, for instance.
We have a young Chinese colleague who was our translator, and I had no idea. She seems like kind of a shy
She
young
seemed
person,
quiet.
quiet and shy.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that she got venture capital money from California to set up a platform matching Chinese therapists and patients around the world. And then she's expanded it with her Stanford MBA Chinese husband into a whole platform doing training. And so she had us give lectures to Chinese for 40,000 people. When I did it, I got 10,000 likes. I've never had one like.
Not even on Facebook.
So I mean, both of us are
Fantastic.
having fun with this, but what Jill's sort of moved into more of is different. And by the way, I'm still in practice because I love it. I'm not stopping that.
I also want to hear about what you're getting into, Jill, but the other question I have for you, because other people have done this where they've stepped away from something they've built, but they've stayed involved. And I've heard two things. One, I've
Oh,
heard
I know.
sometimes it's a pinch, sometimes it's good. What has your experience been?
It's a little of both.
A little bit?
Right.
It's fine for us in that we still want to be involved with teaching the students here. I mean, they're all
Yeah.
around the country. I think it's a little hard on the people who follow us. They don't really want us to leave, but making it their own thing is a little harder.
Yes.
And in that sense, it'd be better if we just stepped away. But I think the institution actually, that institution still does need us as the sort of figureheads, involved figureheads, I
Yes.
think.
So what have you pivoted to?
Well, as I say, it's not exactly a pivot. It's sort of an add-on. Working a bit less in the office, I have more time to return to things from my youth, in particular, theater and dance. So I've started studying ballroom dance, and since I took it up in later years, I'll never really be that good at it because you can't recover a flexibility that you never had. But still, it's excellent for the mind and the body. It's extremely complicated to remember every position of every part of your body at the same time that you're trying to follow the lead of a partner at the same time you're supposed to know your own part and make the whole thing look spontaneous and effortless. It's really
And you're
hard.
competing.
And I'm competing at my level, which
Yeah.
is the over 70s in the class C, kind of, and the bronze level, you know, way down here. But still, it's a great pleasure, and it keeps me. It's a whole underworld that I had no idea existed. Like hundreds of people are doing this, traveling all around the country to do it. Much more than I am. Mine is a limited engagement. And then the other thing is in theater. I started a theater, I perform in theater, and I have written one play, and I'm currently working on another.
I know I'm going to get to hear it on Saturday.
And you're doing piano.
Oh, I
Which
forgot
went
the
back to-
piano.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm doing the piano too. Sometimes I think, I've turned into a little girl again. This is what I used to do when I was
beautiful.
a little girl. I'd do my homework, and then I'd go to my lessons.
Your theater lessons, you can. Well, one of the things I was talking about with someone else about, there's a New York Times article recently about mediocrity and how we should really honor it.
Oh, yes.
And that hobbies used to be something that people did that were fun, not that you had to write the best-selling play or you had to be the Chopin expert, but because you enjoyed it.
I think that's a slightly hard thing. I mean, that would fit my tennis.
Mediocrity is very hard for us.
But
It's a wrong word too.
No,
It's
no,
not
but
really
I
No,
think-
mediocrity.
it's a good word.
No,
Just being
because-
in the middle.
Because
Yeah.
I think if you pick up something new, you're probably not going to be at the level you were as a professional who
Right.
spent your whole life
Yeah.
honing skills. I mean, that's partly why, although I'm doing all these new things, I don't want to give up what I'm really good at.
I understand.
And
Because
which I still
you draw
enjoy.
your self-esteem from it, really.
And also because I write a lot, but that's where this material comes from.
I understand.
But I think it's true. You have to settle for, okay, you learn something, you get pretty good at it,
Yeah,
but not like people who've been doing it all their lives.
yeah. It's
But
the
David,
joy of the experience.
your little add-on is tennis.
Well,
And-
I've
and-
been doing that all along.
Yes, but you didn't do it with this much intensity.
I'm
Like
doing
you're
more of
playing
it.
4 times a week, which you
Wow,
couldn't
that's a
do
lot.
when we were more active professionally. But you're getting better.
But I'm glad I'm not doing it for a living.
Yeah.
Well, no, but still to feel you're improving. And I feel that with the dancing. I'll never be great, but I improve all the time.
Exactly.
That's right.
And it just depends on where you are in your arc of life.
Yeah.
I don't want to switch for a minute and ask you, and maybe this is a little different in your profession, but have you experienced or do you believe people experience age discrimination?
Not in our job.
In our job, aging is actually valued because we know more, we're wiser, we're more relaxed, we can deal
You
with
can maybe do
more
things,
complex
Understand.
situations.
What about
Yeah.
other people or even clients that you have? Do you believe there is
Yeah.
a problem with older people wanting to stay in the workplace?
Definitely,
Sure.
definitely. I mean, you'll see really highly competent men in industry. They pass that 50. If they lose the job, they're out of work for 18 months.
Or
It's
the lawyers
really
who
hard.
are retired at 65 and 65 now. You know, if you have health and your mind's fine, you've
You know,
got another 20
some of them
years,
feel pushed out,
and they do
Yeah,
feel pushed out.
yeah.
but a lot of them reinvent themselves.
I was going to say,
too.
what do you tell people if they ask for your advice on how to handle that?
Well, the lawyers
Pivot.
know
Pivot
they're-
is the answer.
They know they're
Pivot.
going to be retired, so
Yeah.
I think it's really important to develop what's going to be next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might know, but they don't believe it. At least the lawyers I
Is that-
know.
well,
They know
you
it,
would
but
know.
they never really
You would
believe
know.
it's going to happen.
But I wouldn't like that about a law career.
Yeah.
So that unless you are the rainmaker, you're going to get
Yeah.
But
retired.
think of the lawyers we know. These are not patients, but friends. What they do, they'll go take another degree, say in history or English, and then they'll teach at one of the lifelong learning institutes, and they get tremendous satisfaction.
And
from that.
that's-
One of them is invested in gardening and sustainability and farming.
But I think it's really important to develop, to have an interest you want to do. I thought maybe I'd take up photography. And then I thought, I'm not that interested.
Really?
I
You
don't
have to-
really
yeah.
care enough to invest in it the way I'm investing in my China project.
Yes. Yes.
So that's not a good choice.
Exactly.
Wouldn't for me.
Exactly.
And I can't paint, so that's not happening.
Now, back to the China project for a minute. One other question I've been asking folks is, when you look back, if you were yourself when you made that decision, and I'm assuming it was a decision you had to think carefully, weigh carefully, you were going to do this. It's got the bonus of travel, but travel is challenging. Are you glad you did it?
Oh, I'm thrilled.
Are you?
And I love the travel. I don't get
I know you do.
I don't get jet lagged as it happens.
Yeah.
I've got a way of handling it. But it was serendipity.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was going to come along and give me the next set of things to really focus on. But I did know to embrace it.
Yeah.
That's another pivot. Naps. Taking naps is a pivot because you can't do that when you're working full time when you're very young.
Yes.
And when you're older, you learn to take like 10-minute, 50-minute naps. And it keeps you going all day. And also it's the reason you don't get jet lag because you can sleep anywhere.
That's true. That's true. But I learned it from your mentor.
Yeah, I know.
Who also is like that?
Yeah, he used to take a nap every day. I'd never seen anyone take a nap. Yeah.
My mother was a great believer in naps. Whenever I would call her and tell her I was worried about something, she'd say, "Take a nap." It actually
Well, it
helps.
fits with our circadian rhythms, actually.
Really?
Fit better if you go down in the middle of the day for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, I think the main thing is that somebody really identify what they want to be doing and do that.
And do it.
And do it with enthusiasm. And
So your passion is what's driven you all along. It continues to drive you.
right.
Let me see if I've asked you everything I want to ask.
One other thing I could add is following your children's interests.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes they branch out into areas that you have known nothing about. And it's another opportunity for tremendous learning and engagement in social issues of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is different from investing in your grandchildren, which is a good thing. For me, that would not be enough
I understand.
as a sole reason for getting up in the
I
morning.
understand. And I think that's a lot of people face that as an issue, is that especially, in my view, women, because that's sort of what we're supposed to long to do. But
Well, if
there's
you
a limitation.
Do,
If
then
you do,
fine.
do it.
Just
Exactly.
know they're going to leave you too.
Don't you hate that?
No, I mean, they have to be launched. They,
Yes,
they
yes.
have to move on, and they can love you and honor you, but they got to go to college or whatever they're going to do.
It's a very special relationship, a grandparent relationship, but it has its limitations too. So I guess that's what you're saying is there's
Well, some of them are great, like you can hand them back.
that's one of the best things.
I like the part which I say is that grandparents and grandchildren get along so well because they have a common enemy.
Yeah, there's something to that too. You know, I was going to say back to the interest is I have a son who's active in politics, and he took me to Pod Save America, which is this group podcast of people that worked in the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was the only person who was a non-millennial there, and I had
Yeah.
a blast.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Just getting that exposure.
It's a total
was
different
so
energy.
cool.
And I think really hanging around with young people is a really
And also multi-generational learning.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
That you can learn from them, they can learn from you. It's not just a one-way street.
Absolutely.
I have two more questions. Back again to as you made these decisions, you had this institute, it was one of your children. Obstacles, as you thought about it, were there obstacles going from letting go of it? Were there times when you thought, oh, we've made a mistake, we shouldn't have done it this way?
Yes.
For people who were
The
just
main-
listening, a
Well,
lot
the
of body
main-
language
no,
around
the
that?
main trouble was that we had a lot of trouble finding people who could take the leadership
Oh, really?
successively. It took me a long, long time.
Well, David, remember, we tried to hand over, and a committee was formed to come up with a new plan. And they came up with a plan that the board described as the Balkanization of the Institute. And it was so terrifying to the board that you had
And
to,
I
you
thought
had
it
to
would
go
kill
back
I thought it
in.
would kill the institution in a year. So I had to go back in.
So,
and
so in
that
other words, there
another
was a
6 years.
false start.
Oh, no. So,
A
yeah.
false start to letting go.
Right. And
How'd you finally get it right? It was just the right people?
Waiting,
people
waiting
came
till the
along.
people were trained to come along.
other people, it wasn't that group just couldn't do it. And it was the group who really were of our generation, and they couldn't really take it on.
Yeah.
None of them, they'd been great faculty members and colleagues, but they couldn't take on the leadership. So that was the main
Yeah.
trouble, was
Yeah.
that we couldn't let go as fast as we thought would have been good for the institution, but not with the
Yeah.
people who were there to do it.
But you
And-
got there eventually.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
My last question is kind of a broad one, but what would you say to other people, or is there anything I didn't ask you about around this part of your career and your life? Knowing you as friends, I know that you have a very vibrant, active life. I wouldn't say you are retired. We sometimes use the word rewired, not retired.
Right. Right.
That's
But
cute.
what else would you want to tell people?
Well, you do have to keep in mind that you're facing more death anxiety than before. You lose some friends. You lose your own parents, of course. You're then staring into the
And
the
friends
void
who-
by
friends whose
yourself.
minds leave them.
and yeah, you've got a couple
Yes.
friends
Right.
who've become demented, and it's so
Yes.
sad.
Yes.
You stay loyal, but you know that the connection can't be the same.
Yes.
So these are the challenges of our age. And, you know, and we have to embrace them, deal with them as they come to us, but at the same time, might as well make the most of what time we all have left. That's the way I look at it.
At my father's funeral, my mother died, then my father died. We were leaving the funeral parlor, and my son said to me, "Well, Mom, you're up."
I know. Well, I'm glad he could joke about it because
You're
it's
next.
absolutely true.
His joke, I wasn't laughing quite as hard, but no, it's true.
I think it's true. I think, at least my adjustment is I carry a clear recognition that this is not forever.
Yeah.
Fortunately, even if my body has an occasional limp or creak, my mind seems okay to me anyway. I'm not sure my children think
I
so.
haven't noticed
But,
anything.
we got it while we've got it, and it's there to be enjoyed. And in that way, there are a lot of worries I don't have anymore. I mean, there are worries about every child or grandchild, but it's their problem now. I sympathize. I do everything I can, of course, but it's really their life, and that's different, and it is freeing too.
One thing to say, since you're talking to a couple, is that we also realize that most likely one of us will go first, and we don't know which one, and we'll never know that until it becomes clear, and you can't exactly plan for that. You just have to hold it in mind. But David has a solution.
Our joke is that when one of us dies, I'm going to Paris.
Okay. It's a good joke. But that's true, and you are the only people that have brought this up, but it definitely, on the one hand,
Absolutely.
it's a frightening prospect, and on the other hand, it makes every day that much more precious.
It does.
Absolutely.
It really does.
Well, I think that's right.
Yeah.
That's
It's-
right.
That eventuality will, however, call for the ultimate pivot.
Yes, the ultimate pivot. The other thing I was going to say is I think as I look at it, it makes the decisions around where I'm going to pivot and what I'm going to use with my time. It used to be, well, if I don't do this now, I'll do it later. Now you get to the point where it's never too late to have a happy childhood, but if you don't get your piano lessons in, or you don't have an opportunity to do theater or tennis, you're not going to do it 3 decades from now.
Look, you've
Well,
got
that's
it.
the Nike symbol.
Yeah,
Do it now.
yeah, exactly.
But-
live in the
Okay, you
moment.
got to
Do it
do
now.
what you got to do for your children. You're going to do that. We're
Yeah.
going to do that.
Right.
But other than that, and because we're lucky enough that our resources are okay, I only do what I want.
Yes.
Now that does involve fulfilling obligations to people I care about and all that, but mainly it means I really feel invested in what I get to do, which is truer than it would have been
Yeah.
30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, you two are both inspirations and wonderful friends. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Molly.
Happy to be
sharing.
here. Yeah, thank you.
You've been watching Job IQ Outside the Box. You can subscribe on our website. There's lots more information. Thanks for listening and watching.